Welcome to the Best Music Podcast, where we see behind the curtain and discover hidden habits and success secrets of noteworthy music makers so you can speed up your journey to your dream music goals by taking what you need from their wins and lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Dan Spencer, and this week's featured guest is Joe Deninzon. Joe Deninzon and Stratospheerius are celebrating their new live box set, Behind the Curtain, live at Progstock, which is now in the top 10 on Relic's Jam Band radio charts. Behind the Curtain, live at Progstock is out on Melodic Revolution Records as a collectible 2 CDs and 2 DVDs Blu-rays box set. 2 performances at the Northeast's premier progressive rock festival shows this treasured, ladies and gentlemen, treasured, electric violinist, singer-songwriter's history of favorites in the past decade and a half in the rock scene. Joe Deninzon, who, by the way, is a treasured violinist and singer-songwriter, and Stratospheerius' previous studio album, Guilty of Innocence, reached number 4 on the Jam Band Relix charts in North America and broke the European Top 200 indie releases at 72. Joe is now, if I may, one more time, just for the rule of 3, the treasured violinist for the legendary rock band Kansas, now on tour celebrating their 50th anniversary. He has also played violin for The Who, Bruce Springsteen, 50 Cent, Sheryl Crow, and is the concertmaster for Renaissance.
You could go to joedviolin.com or stratosband.com, STRATOS band.com, and it'll take you to the same places. Easier to spell on the radio, you know.
Sweet. So joedviolin.com?
Yes.
Everyone, that's Joe, the letter D, VIOLIN. I had to remember how to spell violin. .com. We did it. Hey, man. So since the last time we spoke, you have been doing session work. You have been doing teaching gigs around, and you also landed a high-profile gig with the legendary rock band Kansas. Now, I would be doing myself a curiosity disservice, and I think other people curiosity disservice, if we didn't talk a little bit about the process of learning the repertoire or the repertory for going out. Because, I mean, it's not like there's like 24 songs you got to learn. It's like there are albums and albums and albums worth of content to learn. So talking about how you go through that process and how you went through triaging what you were going to learn, when you were going to learn it. You know, we're using charts. Were you listening? Bit of both. Love to dive into that process, if you wouldn't mind, as a first topic of conversation.
That's a great topic and something I love to talk about. It's a very interesting question. First of all, I want to say everyone has their own process of learning music. You know, as some people just do everything by ear, have a perfect memory. Some people have to read everything, you know. So first thing I want to dispel is I did not have to learn every song on every album of Kansas ever. That would have been very, very difficult, if not impossible, in the time I had. It's a lot of music, a lot of notes. All the notes, I think.
Yeah, yes.
So what happened was that this was back in February. Tom Brislin, my friend from the prog community in Jersey, who had been their keyboardist and musical director since 2018, texted me while I was getting stitches at the hospital for a cut finger, which was a very, very ironic time to get this text. I was cutting a salad. long story. Anyway, no more salad cutting for me. So he goes, yeah, text me, call me when you have a minute. I need to talk. So I called him. He said, well, every member of the band has an understudy in case someone gets sick with COVID. We don't have to cancel the show. It's the new rule. We don't have an understudy for violin. Would you like to learn the music and check it out? I'm like, absolutely, of course. So that was really it, just to have the music. And he goes, yeah, we're preparing music for 50th anniversary tour. It's 25 songs. The band, nothing is written out, so you have to learn it by ear or write it out. I'm going to send you the isolated uh, tracks from the mix board. Some of the stuff has not been played live in 40 years, so you have to go from the studio recordings or any bootlegs you find on YouTube. And I'm a big transcriber. I like to transcribe everything I can. I've been doing it since I was 15, and then I just memorize, and that's my method. So he sent me the stuff. He goes, well, send me some videos of your band I can share with Phil Ehart, who's the drummer and has been managing the band for 40 years. So I sent Imposter by Stratospheerius, my band, and I think one more song, maybe it was Storm Surge, I can't remember. So the next day I get a call from Phil. We spoke for like an hour. Really just a sweetheart of a guy. Really loved the music. Um, Felt it was a good fit for Kansas, and we started talking, and basically, he was practically offering me the gig, and I'm like, well, David is such a great violinist, David Ragsdale. I have the deepest respect for him, huge fan for many years, but he couldn't tell me what was going on. So I started learning the music for the next few weeks. Every day I would transcribe a song or two. Once I had everything written out, took me about 2 weeks. I started memorizing it. The problem was we had a trip to Disney World planned with my family. Timing wasn't great, but I had to be down in Orlando for the ASTA string conference anyway. So we were down there, and every day while I was waiting in those long lines for the rides, I'd be looking at my Dropbox where I had all the written music and just memorizing it. It was a good way to occupy my brain and kill a few hours while I was waiting in line, for the roller coasters and stuff. So it sounds a little wacky, but I didn't have a lot of time to sit with my instrument in the room, practice. So then by the time and it took me about 2 months of really getting that stuff in my brain. And by the time, I started really working with it, it was just getting it to muscle memory and drilling it. But that's my process, and I like having, when you have a visual way to learn music, you don't always have to be practicing it or singing it. You could be sitting on in the subway or on a bus and just learning it mentally. The mental work is 70% of it, at least. What were you
Could
gonna
I
say?
could
Sorry.
I interrupt you for a moment there?
Yeah.
And could you perhaps clarify for people what that looks like? So you're audiating while you're reading the music. Are you also thinking about are you literally seeing yourself? Is like mental practice where you're seeing yourself playing the things as you're reading it, or are you just reading it sort of memorizing, pitch, intervals, and if you have double stops, chords, and
Mhm.
then rhythm?
I notate everything, and it's all, the pitch, the rhythm is all written there.
Sure.
And some of it was guitar, some of it was violin, because I double on guitar. Um, and I'll learn a section at a time. There'll be like an introduction to a song with a bunch of crazy riffs, and I'll just be kind of meditating on that, looking at the music, then looking away, then visualizing the fingering, visualizing how I would play it, then later throughout the day, kind of reviewing that, and it would slip my mind, and I would keep reviewing it, and then the next section I would just piece it together little by little. But
So
I'd be,
you're standing in line at Disneyland. So you're
yeah,
about to go on some ride. You're about to go on the Buzz Lightyear ride or whatever.
right.
And as you're waiting for your turkey drumstick, again, whatever,
Yeah.
you're waiting a lot for your turkey drumstick. Just so people who've never done this before, they get an idea of what's happening. It's like, can you describe that moment in a little bit more detail? It's like you're sitting there, you're imagining the neck of the violin, you're imagining your hand there, you're sort of seeing yourself do it. That level of mental practice, we're actually visualizing the act of what you are doing while you're looking at the music, or you look at the music, you memorize it, then you're thinking about what it would do, and then going back and looking at the music, and then going back and thinking about how you do it.
No, it's instantaneous, because when I'm looking at the notes, I know how I would
Yeah.
finger it and what the shape of the phrase would be. So it's all at the same time. But for me, it like I'll work on a section of a song at a time and visualize it, look at the part, look away, close my eyes, imagine it, look back at it, and then keep reviewing it. And then throughout, because it was so much stuff, throughout the coming days and weeks, I would review stuff that maybe I hadn't gone through in a while and keep going back and then get new stuff in. And, it took a while. And it's, as everyone knows, who knows Kansas, it's not easy music. A lot of people know Carry On Wayward Son, Dust in the Wind, and Point of No Return, the three most famous songs. But when you get into the deep cuts, beyond, and those songs are pretty complex too. They're very structured and arranged and intricate. There's a lot going on. But the deeper you go into the rabbit hole, it's crazy. It's just relentless. I'm like, wow, it just keeps going and going and going, and more crazy time signatures and riffs, and you know, it was kicking my butt. I was, it was boot camp. I pushed myself really hard to learn this stuff. Um, but what I got to say though, because all these years I had my band Stratospheerius, and all those years of playing clubs and playing for no money and driving all over the country and releasing music at my own expense and trying to just put stuff out into the universe, you know, that I would say it paid off. I would tell people to keep following your passion and playing music you love, and that comes from your heart. That's not contrived, because that's I think what sold them on giving me the gig that I had Stratospheerius, and I wasn't consciously auditioning for Kansas all those years, but you know, maybe I was without knowing it. So I was just doing what I love, and that's really the key. Anyway, so the next few months, it became evident to me that there were some health issues with David that were preventing him from continuing to tour with the band. But they were hoping that he could continue because he had been a member of their family for 30 years. And Kansas is like a family. Everybody in the band and crew is very tight knit, really looks out for each other. And, it's a really beautiful group of people. So um, at one point he was looking better. And I was told, after I had done a lot of work with the music, I was told Dave was going to do it. Just stand by um, as a backup. But, we're doing everything we can to include him. And I respected that. But then things took another turn in May. So, I was actually asked to record some clips of me playing some songs just to see how I was coming along. That was kind of the unofficial audition. And by that point, I was stronger with the material, and I recorded uh, Song for America and Miracles Out of Nowhere, which is two of the hardest songs, especially Song for America. It's all violin solos for 10 minutes. And they were really impressed, and that kind of sealed the deal, you know. So it was basically 3 months of mental roller coaster. you know, will I be doing this? Will I? Probably not. Whatever. It would be cool. But I had to kind of learn everything really well with the understanding that I may never get to play it on stage with them. You know,
A couple of things.
so
Number one, I just want to hammer home the thing we were talking about, the mental practice before. It's like people, if you imagine, if you close your eyes and imagine an orange, it's like you've seen an orange so many times. You can imagine an orange if you close your mind. Now, Joe's been looking at his violin for so many years, and at such a high level that he's able to imagine the violin and his hands on the violin, and he's able to see how he would move his hands on the violin in his mind, and through that way actually learn the piece on the violin, and then sit on the violin. It's only 30% of the work is actually on the instrument. So I just wanted to drive that point home for anyone who's never experienced that idea of mental practice before. Another point is, Joe, your level of work ethic of like, look, regardless of whether I step on stage or not with these songs, I'm going to be performance ready. Can you talk about that mindset?
yeah, I mean, they do it all the time on Broadway, in operas, in a lot of professional uh, musical organizations. They have understudies. They have people who really have to step in cases of emergency. Conductors have assistants. And my wife is in the New York Philharmonic. I remember Alan Gilbert got stuck in traffic, and his assistant was called in really last minute to conduct uh, Rite of Spring, or it was a big program. And I mean, you have to be ready for those opportunities, because that's how careers get started across the board. Um, so it's hard when you know, you don't know if you'll ever get to actually do the gig, but to be prepared, you have to be very self motivated, and I don't think I've ever been in that situation before. So I had to really push myself and remind myself I can't slack. I have to keep up with the music. I had a few close friends who are musicians that my friend Tony, who's a guitarist in LA, kept checking in with me. Joe, are you working on it, man? Keep working on the Kansas thing. Don't slack. He was just kind of kicking my like a life a motivation coach. I'm grateful to him for that. But uh, so I had like a circle of people that were really encouraging me. I didn't really make it a public thing. I had a close circle of friends that knew about it. So definitely helps to have a support system. Um, so yeah, the work ethic is a big thing, and knowing how to prioritize things and how to manage your time.
For anyone interested to learn a little bit more about the game of being prepared for multiple shows at the same time, we did an episode with a violin viola player, JJ Johnson,
Hmm.
early on in this podcast. You can go check that out. Can you talk a little bit about what you just said about how to prioritize, how to manage the time? Because it's not like the only thing you had to do every day from the time you got up was prep
No, no,
Kansas songs.
no. Well, I'm a father of two, so I have parental responsibilities. I'm constantly getting called for session work to record for people. My string quartet, Sweet Plantain, was trying to record a CD. Stratospheerius was recording a CD. Um, I teach at a New Jersey City University, so I had students, um, and just various gigs I was doing. I also contract string groups all over New York for weddings and private events. I still do that. That's still a side hustle for me. So it's everything. I mean, my life is pretty nuts. And the crazy thing is, when I knew I was going to do it, the way Kansas works is they have a theater in Macon, Georgia that they rent because a bunch of them live in that area. The band lives all over the country. Two guys live in Chicago. Me and the keyboardist in New Jersey, a bunch of guys in Atlanta, one in North Carolina. So everyone converges. So they flew to Macon. We were there for 3 days, like long rehearsals. And then you're, ready to tour. And everyone came in having done their homework, knew the music. It was just putting the show together, dealing with tech issues and everything. But that weekend was Memorial Day weekend. I flew down there, rehearsed the show, then flew home for 2 days. Stratospheerius did the CD release party for the live project at the Iridium. So I had to fly in, rehearse with Stratospheerius, completely different set list of music, harder than Kansas because I'm singing and playing, and it's my stuff, so I know it. And then the next day after the CD release, I flew to Pittsburgh to play my first Kansas show. So you can imagine how I wanted to collapse by the end of that week, but it was a very good feeling, good kind of tired, but you just gotta learn to switch channels. I thrive on that. I love the challenge of it. You know, I feel lucky that I get to do those kinds of things. So I just power through. You know, um, yeah. If it's work that you love, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life, as they say, right? So, um, so yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about what it means to you to be able to find this new ground and to be able to look, because like you said, you've never had to do this before. This is a new thing. So it's like you're pushing yourself to become like you're already world-class musician, like no doubt, but we're all as musicians always growing, always learning, we're always finding something new to get to. It's like no
Yeah.
one's ever done. No one
No,
is ever done.
you don't want to be
So
done.
no,
Why
where
would you
would the
want to be
fun
done?
be in that?
No, there's no end.
No, there
Yeah.
is no end. So
Um,
what was this feeling for you of finding this new? You clearly had to ask something new of yourself to do this many high level performances with that number of different songs, with different groups, flying to different places, putting your body through the dehydration of flying and landing. It's like, that's a lot. Could you talk about that experience of expanding your bandwidth and what that felt like then, and do you feel that difference carrying over now? Like, do you feel like you can take on more now?
Yes, I think a few things help me out that work for me. I'm a runner. I mean, I'm not like I haven't won races. I'm like super fast, but I love to run. That's kind of my thing. It helps me meditate. I don't listen to music. I just zone out and just think about important things. So that really helps me stay focused and get exercise and get oxygen in the brain. I try to stick with it every day or every other day. I ran the New York Marathon in 2016. Um, and I try to keep a regimen. Like I try to get enough sleep, drink a lot of water, run, make sure, the other thing is just going through the music, whatever you're going to do a couple hours before, just kind of getting your brain tuned into it. And that's what Kansas does. Like when we have a show, we'll do like a 30-minute, 40-minute sound check, then photo shoots, but then we have a 45-minute rehearsal. We have a warm-up room where we just run songs. And what that I thought, man, that's a lot of rehearsing before a 2 hour, 10-minute show. But then I realized that just really tunes your brain and gets you back into the music, and you're just in this zone before going on stage. That really helps. I mean, it's hard music. It's always good to refresh, but just thinking about it and going through it, no matter how many times you've played it before, it's so valuable. Um, so I think that's part of it. The other thing that motivated me with this gig, I've had a lot of some opportunities that didn't come through that were similar to this in the past, like huge bands I auditioned for that I fell short for whatever reason and was really disappointed in myself. And all that history was a big motivator that, man, I got to nail this and not make the same mistakes I made in the past, whether it was, preparation or, you know, not knowing, trying to do too much in the days leading up to it and, different things. Um, all the roads have kind of led me here. Everything so you got to fail 100 times before you succeed.
Hmm.
So that's the big thing. They talk about it with athletes too. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think when we exercise, we can find new ground within ourselves. We can kind of go to war with our own minds and push the
Yeah.
boundaries of what we think is possible, like within our own minds, and then that can carry over into other areas of our life. Joe, I'd be very curious for you to define, and I think this would also be very helpful for everyone listening too. A couple of times you've compared different types of music as being harder than other types of music. Could you maybe break that down with some more terms and really clue us in and help us dial in to understand what you're categorizing as hard and why you're categorizing things as hard and how you're comparing different musics with this label of hard?
Oh wow. I don't remember what I said about
Oh, sure.
about difficult music, but
Sure. So you
um,
said that, for example, Stratospheerius, that the music is technical. You said it was harder than Kansas. That you had to fly there, and so you fly in and play some music for Stratospheerius, which was harder than Kansas. And then also just now you said, well, when the music is hard. So could you maybe explain for people what hard is in this context? Is it
har-
is it technically demanding? Is it like the virtuosity of it?
things are different. Difficult things are things. The definition of difficult is different for each person. Stratospheerius music is difficult because I'm singing and playing really complicated violin parts at the same time, and working a lot of pedal effects. But what makes it easy is it's something I wrote. It's my music, so I can handle it. I have to review it, but I've done it a million times. Kansas is challenging. I'm not singing and playing at the same time usually, most of the time, but it's just a lot of notes, a lot of complex songs that you have to memorize. And a lot of it was new to me. I would say, Paganini caprices are super, super hard, but they're probably easy for him because he wrote it.
Yeah.
Uh, so, and he had some kind of, he was double jointed. He had some crazy fingers. So he was able to do things that us mortals cannot do. So, um, you know, and it's then again, Paganini is easier for some people to play. My friend Rachel Barton Pine, one of the top violinists in the world, did a whole concert of all his caprices 2 weeks after giving birth. So everybody's different. For me, I actually get more nervous when I have to play like a classical recital, when I know everything it has to be is written out and is going to be compared with everybody who's played it before, because it's standard repertoire. You have the shadow of all the people, all the great people who have played this music, um, and there's no improvisation. I'm actually more relaxed when I don't know what's going to happen, and uh, when a situation is unpredictable and I can kind of wing it. It's more fun for me, and more I kind of get the adrenaline going. When it's something that's super rehearsed and super scripted, I'm like, Other people, you talk to my wife or any of her colleagues, they freak out when there's any
Right.
improvisation involved. It's the opposite. So maybe I'm weird that way, but we're all different. We're all wired differently. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think the definition of hard is how much preparation something requires, and for for me, this was. I mean, it's not hard now. I know the music, and I could play it. I could step in and play it. It was just the initial task of learning all of it was a challenge for me, but I accepted it, and I knew exactly what I needed to do and how much time I needed to put into it. So,
Thank you very much for refining that definition so we could understand, like, really what, for someone at your level, you're at this world class level of musicianship, and to understand like what part of music at this point in your life is a challenge, I think is really interesting and really cool to see at this very high level. It's like, well, it took me a long time to learn. That's why it's hard. Well, it's technically demanding. That's why it's hard. So I think
um,
that's a really interesting conversation to have. So playing with Kansas, playing with Stratospheerius, which, by the way, I'm sorry, I think I said your band name wrong twice previously in this
you just
podcast. I
said it
think
right.
I know I said it right
Yeah,
this time, but I'm sorry. I think I said it wrong the first two times, so I
that's okay.
apologize.
Third time's the charm.
You know what? Turns out it is. Could you talk a little bit about, you mentioned in classical music there isn't improvisation, but at the same time there's this creative demand by virtue of what you said, that there's been hundreds and thousands of people who've gone before you and who have had something hopefully significant to say with this piece, and now
Hmm.
you have to find something significant to say with this piece, and that in and of itself requires, I would put to you the idea that it actually does require improvisation, but not improvisation in the sense that you are changing notes, but rather improvisation in the sense of the interpretation, and that one
Hmm.
must play with the interpretation, which would, we could argue, be an act of improvisation, to then find our way to something where you would be saying something worth saying, right? Because why show up and do it if you don't have anything to say?
I agree.
So,
Um,
so could you talk about the process of finding something to say in a classical piece? Like, how do you approach that? How do you feel about that?
well, take uh, the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, for example. It's been played thousands and thousands of times by the greatest violin players that ever lived. If I was to tackle that, and I did, I played it in college. It's one of my favorite pieces of all time. It's beautiful. It inspires me. Everyone's going to play it differently. And when you practice something like that, you practice phrasing and nuance and color, and maybe you would play a certain phrase high on the A string instead of on the E string to get a different timbre. But knowing that you're going to be compared with every violinist that's ever played that, and what new thing could you bring to the table? That's a challenge, and that's kind of why I chose not to go into that field, because I felt like that road has been trodden on so many times that I have something else to say in this area that I don't think anyone has said before, and that's kind of I feel my role, my purpose as a musician. I love hearing that piece, using that as one example. The other thing about classical music is it's kind of like training for the Olympics. You have to have a certain level of ridiculous technique that you don't necessarily have to have to play rock or jazz. It's a different technique, but it's so much just practicing and drilling and, like, you know um, learning a gymnastics routine. It's a little more similar to that. especially if you're taking auditions into orchestras. It has to be note perfect and phrase perfect, and it's so focused on perfection. There's not a lot of creative uh, space other than things like phrasing and nuance. And again, there's a lot of opinionated people in classical music that feel that things have to be only done a certain way, and but again, if you're into more contemporary stuff, premiering new works by new composers and doing more new music, then you don't have that shadow of judgment. You can make your own mark on a new piece of music. um, so there's a lot of people in that area of classical music um, that don't have that weight on the shoulders when you're playing a Tchaikovsky concerto, for example. And I was fortunate to I wrote an electric violin concerto and premiered it with orchestra in 2015. That was a bucket list thing for me. It's a 30-minute piece, and I had a bunch of players since then learn it and play it, which was a huge honor for me. And my goal is to, in the next few years, record it, um, probably with different pickup orchestra of different musicians in their individual studios instead of with a conductor, less traditional way. But I want to lay it down and have a proper recording of it and put it out there. So it's something I'm going to work on. And that is half improvised and half written out for the soloist. It's a real kind of prog rock
Yeah.
violin concerto. So yeah.
Speaking of being in modern times and prog rock and pushing boundaries of things, Joe, could you explain to us what the problem is with violins that only have four strings?
It's not a problem. For me, um, it's like I love having the extra range. I love at least five strings. If I'm playing a jazz gig, I want to go down on the C and have those low, beautiful tones. Um, for with Kansas and with Stratospheerius, I have a 7-string fretted Viper electric violin. And what I love about that is I love having the cello range. Um, I like doubling the guitar and playing those a lot of low power chords and bluesy riffs. And they let me do that in Kansas, which the previous David Ragsdale and Robbie Steingart had 5-string violins, and David would double those guitar riffs uh, with a clean tone on the C and G strings, which was cool. But then it sounds a lot heavier when you're doing it an octave down, with the distortion pedal, and they like that beefy sound. So I love playing in that range. So for me, just in rock music, it just gives you more colors and more power to work with. And why does a instrument have to be defined a certain way? Why can't an instrument morph and change its function and its definition with the times, with the music that's being played now, that's being written now? I'm very much in disagreement with purists who say a violin has to have 4 strings and has to be acoustic, and you know they like to freeze things into a certain role, and I like to bend the rules a lot, in what I write and the way I play. So, and then again, I have some 4-string violins. I play classical gigs too, in orchestras and string quartet, and I love that too. So um, there's a time and place for each kind of for each instrument. You know, there's a proper setting where any kind of instrument can shine. So,
When you're going in to do session work, are you bringing both violins in? Are you bringing one? You bringing the other?
well, I do most of my session work in my home studio. So, for
Ah.
example, yesterday I did a commercial for Call of Duty, the video game, and I used one, two, three, four different instruments I used on it. So I had 2 acoustic 4-string violins. That one was really bright, the other was a little darker sounding. I had a 5-string, no, excuse me, 5 instruments. I had a 5-string acoustic electric, which was even warmer sounding. I used it for viola and some violin overdubs. Then I had a real viola, and I had something called a chin cello, which is a violin with 4 cello strings, which I used for cello parts, and I plugged it into an amp to get a fat sound. So I have all kinds of different instruments in my studio, and I layer all of those to get kind of a really 3-dimensional orchestra sound. And they all serve a purpose, and I use them on different kinds of situations when I'm gigging. When I was running around being a freelance violinist, which I do a little bit, but a lot less now. So I have quite a collection. I have two electric violins. One's a 6 string, one's a 7 string, and I'm getting a new Viper built right now, a new 7 string. So
Custom?
um, everything is customized
Oh,
to some degree, but they have a pretty
oh.
standard design, Mark Wood. But they do you want frets or no frets? Do you want 4, 5, 6, 7 strings? What kind of paint job do you want? All that stuff. So I'm doing 7 frets, the works.
Love it.
Go big or
Love
go
it.
home, as they say.
Yeah, right?
So
Your chincello reminds me of my 6 string banjo I've got back there. I was like, you know what? I'd love to play the banjo, but can't be bothered to deal with anything that doesn't have 6 strings and has frets, and I can play it literally exactly the same as a guitar. So,
yeah,
hey.
I love banjo. That's something I always wanted to learn. So speaking of the chincello, last
Yeah.
Saturday I had a gig that I contracted, and the cellist canceled on me 4 days before. She had a family emergency,
Oh no.
and nobody was available. It was 4 days before. It was Saturday night, so I'm like, I'm gonna pinch hit. So I brought the chincello, plugged it in. I played cello. I read cello clef on that gig, and I've done that a few times. It's fun. So you know, and I don't think the client notices that it doesn't look like a cello as long as it sounds like one. Um, and it's funny when I play a lot of you know 5, 6, 7 string gigs, and then I go back and play a 4 string. I find myself reaching for the fifth string like a phantom limb, and it's not there. It's when I go for certain phrases. It's funny. So yeah.
That's wild. Joe, would you regale us with one more story of session work from your home studio?
Um. Oh God, I have to think about it. I mean, it really. There's uh, so many different things I've done, but
What's one that stands out?
um, you've stumped me. I mean, sometimes, well, I'll tell you, like, I get different requests. Sometimes they want like a layered string section for like a lot of indie artists who are on a budget reach out to me from all over the world, and they want a string section on their song, and they can't afford to hire a real string section. It's just everyone's budget is strapped, not everyone, but a lot of people. So I provide that service. I'll record a full string quartet, layer it like 4 times, and it sounds pretty big. Um, Other times they want electric violins, so I'll play. I'll record a bunch of solos and a bunch of different sounds. The other thing with me is I love to play with effects. I'm always fascinated by exploring different sounds, but not just delay, distortion, and wah, and all the standard stuff. I always find some interesting synthy kind of sounds and colors. And when I'm writing, like for each section, I don't just think what notes am I going to play, what kind of sound can I use here or there, how do I color it? And there seems to be a weird stigma that the way a lot of people see a violin, that it has to sound like a violin, and nothing else. And if you kind of venture into guitar territory, people get weird about it. And I'm always wondering why that is. you know why do guitarists get a monopoly on effects? you know and it's a perception thing. So a lot of people that hire me, I try to turn them on to what are the possibilities, the sonic possibilities of the instrument. And most people are into it once they hear it done well, interesting. But some people aren't. Like I'll lay down 10 solos, and some will be with distortion and whammy and all this crazy stuff, and I'll like them. And the guy will say, "Well, I preferred when you just played straight." I'm like, "Okay, I didn't, but that's your thing." So I don't know. There's no particular thing that stands out. Um, but there have been times when someone who doesn't really know about violin asked me to do something that's physically not possible, unplayable, too fast, too high. It's not possible to play it. And I thought, well, I should just tell this guy that this isn't unplayable. Like, you got to change it. Then I thought, why should I do that? I'll just record it at half speed. So that's what I did. And then I sped it up, and it was played, and he was happy. And frankly, you could call it cheating, but everyone cheats now. It's technology makes anything possible. So if the client is happy and if the listener is happy, there are no rules really.
No.
No, you could do whatever the hell you want.
Yes.
Fight me. I don't care. I'll slow it down, man. I'll speed it up. I'll punch in each note, man. Anything goes. So that's my philosophy. That the ends justify the means. And that's the way I approach writing and recording. The other thing about recording, I'm rambling on. You can stop me
Do it.
anytime.
Do it. Go.
Some people they're obsessed with like, well, we're laying all these tracks down. How are we going to play this live? And I thought about it for a while, because when I'm recording in my studio, sometimes I go nuts. I layer way too many things. If people thought that way all the time, we would never have Bohemian Rhapsody. We would never have some of the great studio masterpieces of all time, because Queen couldn't play that live. They played the recording during the opera section when they did it live. If you watch their live shows from the 80s, that's what they did. But who cares? Because we have that great recording forever, whether or not you could reproduce something live. When Led Zeppelin recorded Achilles' Last Stand, Jimmy Page layered like 20 guitars on it. He only had one when they played it live. They just changed the song and it was cool. So I'm really into studio trickery and creating like a sonic smorgasbord, and then when live is a different thing for me. That's just my view on it. So I'll shut up now.
Oh, you don't need to. I love the rebel heart that you have, Joe. You're like, look, you want me to play it a certain way? No. You want me to sound a certain way? No. You want me to have a certain number of strings? No. And I just love it. And I also love that you said fight me, but I hope no one does fight you, because I the rule of doing nothing with one's hands that could compromise one's instrument playing is a high level rule, and so I hope no one comes up and tries to confront you. And if they do, you could do some no hand jitsu, which is a martial art practiced by musicians around the world where you defend yourself without the use of hands.
Well, I wasn't.
You turn around and run away.
I wasn't talking about physical fighting. I like having the I like having the debate. I like having the conversation.
The debate.
Yeah, but that's what I meant.
But the debate's a moot point, because like it's art, and art is subjective. And if we understand that art is subjective, then it doesn't matter how you make the art. And then on the other side, you would have people say, yeah, well, without structure and defining, how do we figure out what art is good or not? And then it's like, well, okay, does it matter which art is good or not? It's like, well, yes, it does, because we need some type of structure to understand what is good or not. But on the other hand, no, it doesn't. And so it's like, having that duality and having that diversity of opinion within humanity just serves to create more art, because you have the people who want to be more conservative, creating higher level, higher quality conservative art, and you have the people who want nothing to do with the structure, just blowing the top off the thing and creating new ground that soon, at a certain point historically, will actually get filled up with conservative people.
The standard, yeah. It becomes the new conservative. Yeah,
exactly.
So, yeah, rules are made to be broken. I always kind of looked at the world and thought outside the box, marched to my own drummer, so to speak. And that's just how I've always been. I saw what my parents were doing as classical musicians, and I thought, there's another way. There's so much more out there, and I feel like these people are kind of stuck in their world. I don't dislike. I have nothing personally against them for it. I just saw all these other possibilities and wanted to explore them. I love this conversation. So yeah, Stratospheerius. We been playing at the Progstock Festival, which is a great progressive rock festival. It was in Rahway, New Jersey this year. It's at the Williams Center in Rutherford. This year we're not playing, but anyway, we did from two different performances, 2019 and 2021. We released a live double CD, DVD, Blu-ray, 2 hours of music. It's available at stratosband.com, STRATOS band.com. And it really showcases the band live and rocking out. And there's some special guests on there. Alex Skolnick on guitar and Rachel Flowers on piano and flute. And we, why release something like that these days? Why not? We don't care. We love, people still buy physical products out there. but all that stuff it's still available on streaming services too. You can hear the audio of it. But if you want the live video, you got to order it from our Bandcamp. So there you go.
So,
Yeah.
so Joe, if
Uh,
someone is feeling a little bit like a rule breaker and someone wants to see what's happening on the cutting edge of prog violin, they should definitely go check this out, right?
I'm proud of the music we play, and I think people will enjoy it, especially if they like Kansas. If they're Kansas fans, I think they would dig it. Yeah.
Ooh, Kansas fans will enjoy this. Well, I'll tell you what, Kansas fans, go check it out. Joe, could you tell us one highlight, one favorite thing you had of your time at Prague Stock recording this? Like, what's something that stood out and was very meaningful to you? What's a story that's very meaningful to you that you can share about the creation of this project?
Well, outside of playing with my band, which I love, I'm going to shout out. It's Michelangelo Corinali on guitar, Gianni on drums, Paul Ranieri on bass. In 2021, it was still COVID was still happening. They were just getting back into having it live, and John Goodsoe fell ill. We were asked to headline on Saturday night, and the guys who run the festival, my friends Tom Palmieri and Rinaldi, they said Rachel Flowers is playing before you, and Alex Skolnick is playing after you with Percy Jones. You guys should collaborate. And if your listeners don't know, Rachel Flowers is a blind multi instrumentalist, really genius musician who plays piano, flute, voice, bass, guitar. I mean, I've never met a musician like this, and she engineers her own albums, and she's just one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. So she did a set before us, and I've collaborated with her before. Alex Skolnick is the guitarist from Testament, heavy metal legend, also a jazz legend, and he had been in my band many, many years ago. So I decided let's do a song together without the band, just a trio. What do you guys know? We emailed each other. They had never met, and we decided to do Chick Corea's Spain because we all knew it. No time to rehearse. We were all very busy. We got on stage, played a 13-minute version of Spain, and it was probably the highlight of. Some people said it was the highlight of that weekend. Definitely the highlight of the show, and it was just a magical collaboration that was very, very spontaneous, and that's on the record, and you could see it on YouTube as well. There's a video of it.
And what did having that collaboration mean to you?
I mean, what always blows my mind, especially with jazz, is you can walk into a room with people you've never met. I mean, I knew these people, but I've been in situations like that all over the world. Like people you've never met, you might not even speak the same language, but you can play the same music and make magic together. And that's to me is always amazing.
Wow. So if people get this box set, they're going to be able to witness the video of this live moment of three world-class musicians coming together on the stage for the very first time with no prior preparation other than just a couple messages to say what time they're going to be showing up at. And you guys get up on the stage, and not for 1 minute, not for two, but for 13 minutes. Y'all lay it down and we get to witness that? That is so wild and cool.
I'm just great. I was trying to keep up with those guys, but I'm just grateful that we captured it on video and in audio. So, yeah, there's certain moments like that you always look back on and are grateful for. So,
Well, I will
yeah,
look back and be grateful. I will look back on this moment and be grateful for this moment, Joe Deninzon. Thank you so very much for coming to hang with us here
thank
on the
you.
Best Music Podcast. Joe, would you remind us of those updated URLs where we should go check everything out about you?
So my website is joedviolin.com. That's the central hub, and all my social media stuff is linked there. The band is STRATOS band.com, stratosband.com. And you can
Amazing.
find our Instagram and YouTube links there too.
Super. Joe, thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule of literally playing with your fellow rock stars, doing sessions for high-level video games, going around teaching, being such an in-demand guy, and for coming to spend time with us here. So thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to speak with you. And it's great to talk about topics that typically aren't covered in interviews that are really fun for me to dissect and dive into. So really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.